Hi, good day. My name is Cecil Karen Mojica, and for the subject Advanced Management in Information Systems, I'm going to report Chapter 14 Ethical and Social Issues in Information Systems. For this chapter, what our intended learning outcomes is first is to be able to define the ethical, social, and political issues raised by information systems, then define the specific principles for conduct that can be used to guide ethical decisions. Then, third, define the reasons behind the challenges posed by contemporary information systems technology and the internet to the protection of individual privacy and intellectual property. Lastly, we should be able to distinguish the effects of information systems on our everyday life. And as we always say, and as we all know, technology is a double edged sword. It is a source of many benefits, and at the same time, it also creates new opportunities for invading privacy and using information that could cause harm. This actually depends on the institutions or the people that are collecting our information. At the same time, this also depends on us because if we are not responsible enough in um, putting our information online, it could uh, adversely affect us. On the lighter note, technology can be a source of many benefits because um, it, it helps us to do things in a digital way, which definitely makes uh, things faster. And the developments in data management technology, the Internet of Things, and analytics have created opportunities for organizations to use big data to improve operations and decision making. And um, how does it affect us as managers? Of course, we need to be sensitive to both the positive and the negative impacts of information systems to not only to our firm but also to our employees and customers. And using the information that we gather, we need to resolve ethical dilemmas involving information systems. So for the first part of chapter 4, uh, we need to answer this question: what ethical, social, and political issues are raised by information systems? So, in this chapter, we will talk about the ethical dimensions of these and other actions based on the use of information systems. And by the way, uh, as defined by Merriam Webster Dictionary, ethics is the discipline dealing with what is good and bad and with moral duty and obligation. And pagdating sa uh, business, it's not easy to apply ethics on every decision that we make because uh, ang ang kakontra ng ethics is the cost of that decision that we have to enforce. And information systems pose new ethical questions because they create new opportunities for intense social change and thus threaten existing distribution of power, money, rights, and obligations, which is applicable to political issues and even social issues. So we have here a model for thinking about ethical, social, and political issues. By the way, other pressing ethical issues that information systems raise include establishing accountability for the consequences of information systems. We need to be accountable for the information system that we have put in place. And then setting standards to safeguard system quality that protects the safety of the individual and society, and preserving values and institutions considered essential to the quality of life in an information society. And of course, uh, we look at this we look at this as if we are in an ideal setup. And when using information systems, it is essential to ask, what is the ethical and socially responsible course of action? As a manager or as someone dealing with people and making big business decisions, it's really hard to ask ourselves that question. Ano ba yung ethical and socially responsible na decision na kailangan nating gawin? Kasi nga, gaya na nabanggit ko, we need to look at the cost of that decision that we're about to impose. So here on the chart, we could see different layers here. We have the ethical, we have the social, and the political issues, and uh, how the these issues affect every individual, how it affects our society, our polity. And we can also see here on this chart that it is divided into five parts. First is information rights and obligations. Ano ba yung karapatan natin pagdating sa impormasyon, at ano yung obligasyon natin bilang isang individual? One of our key responsibilities to uh, provide correct information. Then we also have property rights and obligations. Ano yung mga karapatan natin when it comes to property, which could include intellectual property. Then we also have the system quality that we need to impose for our society and for our polity. And we also have accountability and control. Now, uh, with regards to this model for thinking about ethical, social, and political issues, we have these five moral dimensions of the information age. We have the information rights and obligation, yun nga yung nasabi ko na. We also have the property rights and obligations, accountability and control, system quality, and quality of life. Under information rights and obligations, we need to ask ourselves, what information rights do individuals and organizations possess with respect to themselves, and as an individual or as a society, what can they protect? And for property rights and obligations, how will traditional intellectual property rights be protected in a digital society in which definitely tracing and accounting for ownership are difficult? And ignoring such property rights is so easy. Yung ngayon dati na sa traditional intellectual property rights, nagkakaroon na ng piracy. Naalala niyo yung movies, actually medyo digital age na, but uh, ang laganap ng piracy noon. Oh, for example, sa movies na sinisave sa mga CDs. In this age, iba na. Everything's digital, everything can be uploaded on the cloud, on the internet. Sa ganong pamamaraan, mas laganap ang piracy. And ano ba yung pwede nating i-impose to prevent that from happening, or to kahit prohibit man lang? And yun nga, sinasabi, ignoring property rights is so easy kasi walang traceability kapag ka mayroong nag-upload niyan online, may nag-download, may nag-re-upload. So nawawalan tayo ng traceability diyan. So it's so easy for us to ignore the property rights. And as for accountability and control, who can and uh, who will be held accountable and liable for the harm done to individual and collective information and property rights. Since traceability is difficult in this digital age, how can we hold them accountable? No, and for the system quality, what standards of data and system quality should we demand to protect individual rights and safety of a society? So we need to join our hands together so that we could um, create a system to ensure the quality of the information information system that we have that we would like to put in place. And as for the quality of life, we need to ask ourselves what values should be preserved in an information and knowledge based society. Dito pumapasok ang ethics natin. Ano ba yung dapat nating gawin kahit we are in this age, in an information, in a digital age, we still need to impose ethics on every action that we're making. And which cultural values and practices does the new information technology support? Now, since in this five moral dimensions of the information age, nagkakaroon tayo ng ethical issues. And there are trends that raise ethical issues. First is the profiling. What happens in profiling? Here, companies purchase relevant information from the ways you generate digital information about yourself to help them finally target their marketing campaigns. So nagsisimula yan sa atin um, when we share information about ourselves, no? And then some companies analyze large pools of data from multiple sources to identify their customers' purchasing and usage habits and make individualized recommendation based on their analysis. That process is called profiling. Sa traditional business, ito yung KYC na tinatawag, know your customer. Ngayon, if we're going to compare it with the digital age, uh, we're now calling it profiling. So, ang kaibahan lang nito is, sa KYC, you interview your customer. You get your information directly from them. But in profiling, you get their information from several sources. If they have if they've given consent for that information, hindi natin alam. Or kung hindi man sila nagbigay ng consent nila, hindi natin alam. Now, these companies gather that pool of information and then they make data analysis of your information and dun sila nagre-rekomenda ng mga produkto para sa'yo. It's all about advertisement. It's all about marketing. Kaya kung makikita nyo sa mga online shopping apps ninyo or sa mga binabrowse nyo online, magugulat na lang kayo, bakit nito nalalaman kung ano yung gusto natin? Dahil na din sa iba't ibang information na nakakalap nila mula sa action natin on the internet. Yun ang nagiging basis nila. And have we given our consent for them to collect our information? Sa totoo lang, hindi na natin alam kasi nasa fine print yan or um, when we sign up, nandun yun. We always just check those boxes out, not reading them. So, yun ang profiling. Then, if we're going to look at this table here, table 4.2, there are technology trends that raise ethical issues. First here is, for example, computing power doubles every 18 months. So, napakabilis na ng proseso natin ngayon. And since mas mabilis na ang proseso natin, yung mga businesses, they depend their core production uh, dito sa mga digital systems nito. They become more reliant to these systems. No? Kung mas reliant sila, of course, they become more vulnerable to system failures. Second is data storage costs rapidly decline. Anong impact nito sa atin? Organizations can easily maintain detailed databases on individuals. So, mas marami silang makakalap na impormasyon tungkol sa atin. And there are no limits on the data collected about you. And then, number three, data analysis advances. Sa dami ng mga impormasyon na kukuha nila tungkol sa atin, mas nagiging personal yung data analysis nila. Companies can analyze the vast quantities of data gathered on individuals, like us, to develop detailed profiles of individual behavior. Large scale population surveillance is enabled. So they can make general analysis of us as a group. They can also make detailed analysis of us as an individual because of the large pool of information that they gather. The networking advances. What's the impact of this? The cost of moving data and making data accessible from anywhere falls exponentially. So access to data becomes more difficult to control. So sobrang dami, it's so difficult to control. And then the mobile device growth impact. Individual cell phones may be tracked without user consent or knowledge. The always on device becomes a tester. When it comes to this, saan ba tayo maasa? Sa sharing na lang of information on how we can limit our digital footprint. But if we're going to use our cellular phones by default, uh, naka-opt-in tayo sa karamihan ng mga apps. So, mas marami tayong impormasyon na i-share sa iba't ibang services, sa iba't ibang apps, sa iba't ibang companies nang hindi natin nalalaman. Okay, and yun nga, companies purchase those information so that they can better advertise their products or services to us. On the next slide, we have here the Nora. What is Nora? Nora stands for non-obvious relationship awareness. This is a kind of technology that is considered a valuable tool for homeland security, but does have privacy implications because it can provide a detailed picture of activities and associations of an individual. So sa Nora, kumukuha tayo ng iba't ibang impormasyon mula sa iba't ibang sources. We have the watch lists, then we also have the incident and arrest systems, customer transaction systems. We also have telephone records, and we also have human resources systems. Now, if you gather all the information that we get from these, um, at least five systems, doon lumalabas yung name standardization, matching, merging. Ngayon, halimbawa, ikaw ay merong roommate na nagkaroon ng criminal record and you share the same address. Pag ikaw ay ah, mag-try na mag-try lang na ah, lumipad papunta sa ibang bansa, the Homeland Security might get a NORA alert. This is somehow helpful, but if pero since our privacy is invaded here, tulad ng sa telephone records, it could have some serious implications on us. I don't know if this is implemented here in the Philippines, but definitely in the US this is implemented, and I believe there's a similar technology being implemented in China where everyone is under surveillance. Okay, for our next slide, let's go to the next part of chapter 4. We need to answer what specific principles for conduct can be used to guide ethical decisions. Ano nga ba yung ethical choices natin? In the first place, what's the meaning of an ethical choice? Ethical choices are decisions made by individuals who are responsible for their actions. As a responsible individual, you make ethical choices, usually based on your conscience and based on what is right here versus what is wrong. Now, when it comes to business, it becomes different because you have to take into consideration different factors. Sorry, excuse me. And for you to be able to arrive with an ethical choice, we have here the basic concepts of an ethical choice. We have responsibility, we have accountability, and liability. A responsibility is the acceptance of the potential costs, duties, and obligations for every decision one makes. Okay, and for accountability, it is a feature of systems and social institutions. If responsibility is more on individual side, accountability is more on the system itself. It means that mechanisms are in place to determine who took action and who is responsible. So para ma-define natin sino nga ba ang responsible for a specific choice or for a specific flow. And then for liability, liability extends the concept of responsibility further to the area of loss. And liability is a feature of political systems in which a body of laws is in place that permits individuals to recover the damages done to them by other actors, systems, or organizations. And we also have due process here. Due process is a process in which laws are known and understood, and ability exists to appeal to higher authorities to ensure that laws are applied correctly. Due process goes hand in hand with liability. So if our choice is governed by these three basic concepts, responsibility, accountability, and liability, there's a great chance that our decision will be ethical. But um, to check if our decision is ethical, we have to go through an ethical analysis. So for every situation that we encounter, we need to analyze what's the ethical issue in it. Okay, first, we need to identify and describe the facts clearly. So, kailangan natin malaman sinong gumawa kanino, ano ang ginawa niya, no? Kailan at paano. In many instances, you'll be surprised at the errors in the initially reported facts. And often, you will find that simply getting the facts straight helps define the solution. It's very important for us that in this step, all the facts are gathered. So for the second step, we need to define the conflict or dilemma and identify the higher order values involved. So ito ba ay ethical issue? Is this a social issue or a political issue? Could be a different issue, but um, usually umiikot lang yun dun sa tatlo, no? So for the parties to a dispute all claim to be pursuing higher values. Typically, an ethical issue involves a dilemma. So for example, the chapter opening yung case study natin, uh, sorry, yun. So for the step number two, we need to define the conflict or dilemma and identify the higher order values involved. Could be ethical, social, and political issue. Now for the third step, we need to identify the stakeholders. So whether it's an ethical issue, social issue, or political issue, there's always a stakeholder. Ano ba yung stakeholder? They are the players in the game who have interest in the outcome. Sino ba yung makikinabang? Ganyan. Sino ba yung maaapektuhan? So we need to identify who are they. And then for the fourth step, we need to identify the options that you can reasonably take. So pwedeng lahat ng options mo, you won't be satisfied with them, but there's always a better choice. No, it could be an ethical solution or it could not be. Now, for the fifth and final step, you also need to identify the potential consequences of your options. So, for the fourth step, we need to identify our options. Pero dapat din natin gawin na for every option that we have, for example, we have three options, we need to identify the potential consequences of each of those options. And then we can make a decision from there. Pagdating sa making decisions, isa rin sa nakakatulong sa atin para magkaroon ng ethical decision is to look at the ethical principles that we need to apply in our decision making. First is the golden rule. Ano ba yung golden rule natin? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Nga naman. This is personally this is one of my mantra, no. Huwag nating gawin sa iba yung ayaw nating mangyari sa atin, no. We need to put ourselves in the place of others, no. And isipin natin as if we are the object of the decision. Paano ba magiging fair when it comes to our decision making? And personally think golden rule will help us arrive with a fair and ethical decision. Number two, we also need to ask ourselves if everyone did this, could the organization or our society survive? Parang if this decision is not good for someone, then it's not good for everyone. No? Anong parang katulad din yan, if this is going to be unfair for a certain person, then it's going to be unfair for everyone. And then we also need to take into consideration the slippery slope rule. Ano ba yung slippery slope rule na yan? Uh, it means an action may bring about a small change now that is acceptable, but if it is repeated, naging norm na, it would bring unacceptable changes in the long run. In the vernacular, it may be stated as once started down a slippery path, you may not be able to stop. Pag pinagbigyan mo na isang beses, magtutuloy-tuloy yan. And more often than not, mga abuso pa. And the fourth ethical principle that we can consider is the utilitarian principle. Take the action that achieves the higher or greater value. Now, that rule assumes you can prioritize values in a rank order and understand the consequences of various courses of action. When it comes to business, ano ba yung number one natin? Ano ba yung number one factor when it comes to formulating a decision? Formulating a decision regarding an ethical issue. More often than not, it's about the cost. No, uh, kailangan nating magkaroon ng prioritization of values, or we have to rank orders. And then for the fifth principle that we can apply is the risk aversion principle. Take the action that produces the least harm or the least potential cost. Some actions have extremely high failure costs of very low probability, since pwedeng hindi siya mangyari, pwede nating apply yan. But we also need to take into consideration the high failure cost that it may incur. And May iba ring actions na they have extremely high failure costs with moderate probability. We need to avoid actions that have extremely high failure costs, and then we also need to focus on reducing the probability of accidents occurring. Diyan pumapasok din yung risk management natin. And then for the sixth principle that we can apply, we can also apply ethical no free lunch rule. Pwede nating isipin na if something someone else has created is useful to you, it has value, then we can assume that that person wants compensation for this work. We need to assume that virtually all tangible and intangible objects are owned by someone else, unless there is a specific declaration otherwise that we can use it for free. So, with regards to this, actions that do not easily pass these rules deserve close attention and a great deal of caution. And then the appearance of unethical behavior may do as much harm to you and your company as actual unethical behavior. When it comes to our company, or when it comes to working in a society with different fields, there's this professional codes of conduct. What is professional codes of conduct? It is when professional groups take responsibility for the partial regulation of their professions by determining entrance qualifications and competence. They put they put in place code of ethics, which are promises by professions to regulate themselves in the general interest of society. For example, we have the AMA in the U.S. American Medical Society Association. They also have American Bar Association. They also have the Association of Information Technology Professionals and Association for Computing Machinery. And these associations, they have their own set of rules that their professionals should abide to. And pwede yun yung maging basis ng kanilang ethical decisions. Okay, for our next slide, what's the effect or ano ba yung real world ethical dilemmas natin dealing with ethical issues? For example, many companies use voice recognition software to reduce the size of their customer support staff by enabling computers to recognize a customer responses to a series of computerized questions. One good example nito is yung PLDT. Tinanggal yung kanilang mga customer service representatives and they were replaced by automated um, CSR. Ngayon, ang effect nito sa customers, wala tayong makausap. Nagkakaroon tayo ng maraming reklamo. Another example of real-world ethical dilemmas is yung pag monitor ng employers sa kanilang employees through the company provided computers or laptops. Pwede bang ma-consider itong two different issues as ethical issues? Pupuwede. Kasi on the first issue, paano na yung kabuhayan ng mga taong tinanggal at pinalitan ng automated answering machines? Sa second issue naman, hindi ba nai-invade na yung privacy ng mga empleyado? Sobra-sobra na yung pagmo-monitor. On the other hand, ang effect naman ng first issue towards customers is mas napapadali yung pagresolba sa ibang issue ng mga customers na tumatawag kasi andun na carefully, ah, picked yung mga solutions sa mga common questions or sa common issues ng mga customers. Sa second issue naman natin about monitoring employees, eh, the purpose of it is to ensure their productivity, na hindi sila nagde-deviate from what they're supposed to do during their work hours. So, yun yung some real world ethical dilemmas natin. Ano yung dapat nating maging desisyon sa two issues na yon? Now, for the next part of chapter 4, we need to answer, why do contemporary information systems technology and the internet pose challenges to the protection of individual privacy and intellectual property? Kung titingnan natin, it's this is quite easy to answer, no? Um, Bakit nga ba? Ang dali niyang sagutin pero ang hirap din kontrolin. And to control the challenges that that the internet pose to the protection of individual privacy and intellectual property, iba't ibang bansa, yung iba't ibang bansa, they have their own set of laws to protect individuals with regards to their privacy. But ang tanong dyan, nasusunod ba? Like in the US, they have the Freedom of Information Act of 1966 as amended. They also have Fair Credit Reporting Act. They also have Privacy Act of 1974. They also have the HIPAA. They also have the COPA. Iba't ibang privacy laws for different purposes. As for our information rights, we have the right to privacy and freedom in the internet age. Now, let's define privacy. Privacy is the claim of individuals to be left alone, free from surveillance or interference from other individuals or organizations, and even including the state. So, we have the right to privacy. Now, to protect us, to protect our privacy, in the US, they have fair information practices. They also have the COPA, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. They also have the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999, and they also have the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or the HIPAA. With all these laws, hindi to yung lahat ng mga batas na napasa regarding uh, privacy in the US. But r- with all these laws, we need to ask ourselves, nasusunod ba ito? Like for example, for the fair information practices. This is set forth in a report written in 1973 by Federal Government Advisory Committee and updated in 2010 to take into account new privacy invading technology. FIP is a set of principles governing the collection and use of information about individuals. And as for its principles, they are based on the notion of the mutuality of interest between the record holder and the individual. Totoo ba ito? The individual has an interest in engaging in a transaction, and the record keeper, usually a business or government agency, requires information about the individual to support the transaction. After the information is gathered, the individual maintains an interest in the record, and the record may not be used to support other activities without the individual's consent. Ngayon, if we're going to relate ourselves here in the Philippines to FIP, for example, we're securing an NBI uh, clearance. We need to provide our personal information to be able to secure an NBI clearance. Are we assured that that information won't be used against us? With the anti-terror bill that has been passed, anong assurance natin na we our information won't be used against us or won't be used to red tag us? Wala tayong assurance dyan. Now, for the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act naman, or the COPA, in July 1998, the US Congress passed the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, requiring websites to obtain parental permission before collecting information on children under the age of 13. Kaya sa mga websites or sa mga apps, tinatanong kung ano nga ba yung age natin. But again, the question we ask ourselves, anong assurance natin na yung nagsa-sign up is telling the truth? Kasi maraming bata ang nakaka-access sa iba't ibang websites, sa iba't ibang platforms, and they're lying about their age. 'Di ba? So this is hindi siya nasusunod. And as for the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999, uh, this is about financial services and safeguarding the maintenance and transmission of health information about individuals. So in this law, it repeals earlier restrictions on affiliations among banks, security firms, and insurance companies, and it also includes some privacy protection for consumers of financial services. If we're going to uh, relate this law to our situation here in the Philippines, minsan nagugulat tayo bakit tayo na-decline sa ating application when it comes to, for example, loan. Ang hindi natin alam, these companies, they share information about us. Did we consent for the sharing of that information? We may have through the fine print or sa mga nire-require nila for us to qualify in their service or in their for us to avail their product. Yun yung nangyayari doon. We're not sure if we have consented to that kasi hindi na natin masyadong nababasa. Now, for the next law, we also have here the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or the HIPAA of 1996. This took effect on April 14 of 2003, and this includes privacy protection for medical records. The law gives patients access to their personal medical records that healthcare providers, hospitals, and health insurers maintain, and the right to authorize how protected information about themselves can be used or disclosed. Now, as for the medical practitioners, they must limit the disclosure of personal information about patients to the minimum amount necessary to achieve a given purpose. Nasusunod nga ba ito? Some medical practitioners, hindi lahat, but some of them, dinidisclose yung status ng isang pasyente without the patient's consent. Yung iba nga nag-upload pa ng videos uh, of their practice sa ibang pasyente nila. And did the patient consent to that? We don't know. Kasi once it's uploaded on the internet, andiyan na yan forever. And hindi buong story yung na-upload. Just a snippet of a certain situation. So we don't know if the patient consented to that or not. The patient may be protected by the HIPAA, but if this is being strictly implemented, we really don't know. So as for the European Directive on Data Protection, just a comparison with the US. Uh, in the EU, website visitors must provide their explicit consent to be tracked by cookies, and websites should have highly visible warnings on their pages if third-party cookies are being used. So if the default in the US websites or US companies is opt out. Under EU directive, the default on their websites or sa mga platforms is opt-in. So the website visitors must provide their explicit consent. Then a safe harbor is a private self-regulating policy and enforcement mechanism that meets the objectives of government regulators and legislation but does not involve government regulation or enforcement. They have safe harbor to protect their citizens. And you also have the GDPR, or the General Data Privacy Regulation. This applies to any firm operating in any EU country and strengthens the right to be forgotten by allowing individuals to remove personal data from social media platforms and prevent companies from collecting any new information. Personally, naka-encounter na ako ng ibang sites where I could not delete my account. So, yung mga sites na yun, they did not allow me to remove my personal data. But with this directive in the EU, their citizens are protected because they have this right to remove their digital footprint. With regards to this kasi, since hindi siya applicable sa lahat ng bansa, nagkakaroon tayo ng internet challenges to privacy. And ano nga ba yung mga challenges na yun? We start with cookies. Ano nga ba yung cookies na sinasabi? Cookies are small text files deposited in a computer hard drive when a user visits a website. When a visitor returns to a site that has stored a cookie, the website software searches the visitor's computer or nare-recognize niya yung iniwan niyang cookie. It finds the cookie and knows what that person has done in the past. Ano ngayon ang nangyayari? For the person using the computer, mas madali niya na-access yung website. But for the website or the software, pwedeng mas marami pa siyang nakukuhang information since the cookie is already on that computer. At the same time, pwede niyang i-edit yung cookie or i-update yung cookie na iniiwan niya do'n sa visitor's computer. So, gano'n yung nangyayari, and nangyayari 'to ng hindi natin nalalaman. We're not keen with that information. And we also have uh, web beacons. Ano ba 'tong web beacons? They are also bugs or tiny software programs that keep record of the user's online click streams. They report this data back to whomever owns the tracking file. The web beacons are invisibly placed on popular websites by third-party firms who pay the websites a fee for access to their audience. And the purpose of this is for advertisement or marketing. Good example of this is the double click by Google and the Google AdSense. Yan. So, it's yun yung magandang example niyan. Google AdSense and double click. Hindi natin alam na yung mga pag-click-click natin sa mga apps or websites natin, kasama na pala sa mga datang ina-analyze ng mga companies na 'to so that they can better advertise their services and products to us. If it's for free, sabi nga nila, most probably you are the product, 'di ba? The service is free, most probably you are the product. And the biggest trackers were uh, Google, Microsoft, Quantcast. They they are all in the business of selling ads to advertising firms and marketers. And how do they do this? They collect tons and tons of information about us. And from those information, they analyze our data, then they sell those data to these firms. Another challenge that we face is the spyware. Spyware can secretly install itself on an internet user's computer by piggybacking on larger applications. And once installed, the spyware calls out to websites to send out banner ads and other unsolicited material to the user. Naalala ko rito yung mga Lazada. Pagka may naklik ka, biglang lalabas yung Lazada. Ano? It can also report the user's movement on the internet to other computers. Sabi nga nila, mas kilala ka ng cellphone mo or mas kilala ka ng Google mo kaysa sa sarili mong magulang. And now, nearly 80% of global internet users use Google Search and other Google services, making Google the world's largest collector of online user data. So, whatever Google does with its data has an enormous impact on online privacy. Most experts believe that Google possesses the largest collection of personal information in the world. So it's more data on more people than any government agency. And their nearest competitor, ang favorite ng bawat Pilipino, Facebook. Okay. And this is all because of the opt-in or sorry, opt-out model that they have on us. If we don't want our information to be collected by these companies, we need to opt out. Yung default nila is naka-opt-in tayo sa pag-collect nila ng data. Now, some nations, gusto nila ang default is ah, naka-opt out tayo. Mag-opt-in lang tayo if we want our data to be collected by these companies. And yun nga yung nangyayari sa mga European countries. No? They have strict directive on data protection. Recently, yung may mga companies na rin nag-adapt ng opt-in model of informed consent. And what are these companies? We have Microsoft, we have Mozilla Foundation, we have Yahoo, even Google, no? Kaya kung makikita natin, minsan tinatanong tayo if we want our information to be collected for data analysis purposes. Now, for our technical solutions, napakaikli. In addition to legislation, there are a few technologies that can protect user privacy during interactions with websites, such as email encryption and do not track option. Yung iba gumagamit din ng VPN para hindi sila matrack, no? Pero hindi rin naman lahat alam paano gumamit ng VPN. Yung iba naman, they have yung check boxes na tinatanong sa atin. Now, is it data use policy or privacy policy? Firms like Google and Facebook provide privacy policies which are in fact a data use policy. So akala natin yung chine-check natin doon if we agree is a privacy policy. No, it's a data use policy. The concept of privacy is associated with consumer rights, which firms do not wish to recognize. So hence, what they provide us is a data use policy which simply tells us how the information will be used without any mention of rights. Nakalagay doon na pwede nilang i-share sa kanilang third party associated companies. Kung anong companies ito, we don't know. They're not usually indicated on the data use policies that they have for us. Let's go to a different topic. We also have property rights, intellectual property. Now, the major challenge to intellectual property rights, whether traditional or digital, is piracy. Because of that, we have the Digital Millennial Copyright Act or DMCA of 1998. The DMCA implemented a World Intellectual Property Organization treaty that makes it illegal to circumvent technology based protection of copyrighted materials. And just to share it with you, um, I get books from several groups, and there's this group on a social media platform that I joined. They share books, and this is somehow piracy because this is without the consent of the author. Now that group was taken down because of the intellectual property rights nga of the authors of the books and books uploaded inside that group. So yung group na yun tinanggal and yeah, it affected me. No, To protect the intellectual property rights, meron tayong copyright, we have patents, we have trademarks, and we also have trade secrets. Ano-ano nga ba ito? Copyright is a statutory grant that protects creators of intellectual property from having their work copied by others for any purpose during the life of the author. Plus, hindi lang nabubuhay siya physically, but there's an additional 70 years after the author's death. For corporate owned works naman, copyright protection lasts for 95 years after their initial creation. And as for patents naman, a patent grants the owner an exclusive monopoly on the ideas behind an invention for 20 years. The congressional intent behind patent law was to ensure that inventors of new machines, devices, or methods receive the full financial and other rewards of their labor, and yet make widespread use of the invention possible by providing detailed diagrams for those wishing to use the idea under license from the patent's owner. So, kailangan if a product or an item is patented, if you want to reproduce it, you need to secure a license from the owner of the patent. Well, for the patent law, the key concept is the originality, novelty, and invention. So, binibigyan natin ng recognition kung sino man yung nakaimbento ng item or product na yon, no? The strength of patent protection is that it grants a monopoly on the underlying concepts and ideas of software. The difficulties the difficulty is passing stringent criteria of non-obviousness or Nora, originality and novelty, as well as years of waiting to receive protection. So, over the years, nagkaroon na rin tayo ng patent trial. And yun nga, a patent trial of the century is yung Apple versus Samsung for violating patents over iPhones, iPads, and iPods. Sino yung nanalo dito sa patent battle of the century? It's Apple. They are rewarded $1 billion in damages. And um, yung decision prohibited Samsung from selling its new Galaxy 10 tablet computer in the United States. Okay, for the trademarks, we have marks, symbols, and images used to distinguish products in the marketplace. Even taglines can be trademarked, and trademark laws protect consumers by ensuring they receive what they paid for. Also, under the trademark law, we are assured that the product that we avail or we buy are original. These laws also protect the investments that firms have made to bring products to market. Typical trademark infringement violations occur when one firm appropriates or pirates the marks of a competing firm. Yun nga yung sa mga memes, sa Nike, minsan nag-iiba yung itsura ng paa nung nagba-basketball. O kaya yung Nike na name nagiging neck. Yan. For the trade secrets naman, any intellectual work product could be a formula, device, pattern, or compilation of data used for a business purpose can be classified as a trade secret, provided it's not based on information in the public domain. So, trade secrets can be protected under intellectual property rights. And protections for trade secrets vary from state to state, speaking for the laws in the United States. And in general, trade secret laws grant a monopoly on the ideas behind a work product, but it can be a very tenuous monopoly. No? So, katulad ng patent, ini-ensure din yung monopoly ng certain product when it comes to trade secrets. As for the next chapter, We need to answer, how have information systems affected laws for establishing accountability and liability and the quality of everyday life? Mas pinadali ba yung buhay natin ng information systems? In general, masasabi natin yes, no. But um, nagkaroon ba ng negative impact sa sa everyday life natin? Alamin natin. For the system quality, we have data quality and system errors. And we have the three principal sources of poor system performance, which are software bugs and errors, hardware or facility failures caused by natural causes or other factors, and third, poor input data quality. Now, these sources of poor system performance will be further explained in chapters 6 and chapter 8. Under chapter 4.4, how have information systems affected our quality life? For example, a person is injured by a machine controlled in part by a software. We need to ask ourselves who should be held accountable in this scenario and therefore held liable. When it comes to our social media usage naman, should a social network site like Facebook or Twitter be held liable and accountable for the posting of pornographic material or racial insults, or should it be held harmless against any liability for what users post? Kasi pwede nila idahilan, we are just a medium. That's why we're called social media. But when it comes to this issue, in some countries, um, social media platforms are considered accountable. They should impose restrictions on what should be posted on their platforms, no? Yun yung, yun yung dapat na mangyari. And for the quality of life, we have here equity, access, and boundaries. We also have, yun nga, yung three principal sources can also be applied on the equity, access, and boundaries. When it comes to software bugs and errors, isipin natin, sino ba yung pagka nagkaroon ng software bugs and errors sa isang platform na ginagamit natin, for example, yung online banking natin, sino ba yung dapat nating sisihin? Yung yung bangko ba for not ensuring that they have a flawless system? Or kung sino man yung nagkaroon or nag-inflict ng error sa system nung platform na yon. As for the hardware or facility failures, kailangan din natin distinguish sino nga ba yung liable, sino ba yung accountable. And for the poor input data quality, are we accountable? Kasi yung information pwede rin manggaling sa atin. So in general, it is very uh, difficult to hold software producers liable for their software products that are considered to be like books, regardless of the physical or economic harm that results. Kasi, yun nga, it's hard for us to trace kung sino ba yung software producers na ito. And there are other factors na pwede rin makaapekto sa system quality natin. Okay, so as for the quality of life, equity, access, and boundaries, uh, we need to examine some of the negative social consequences of systems, considering individual, social, and political responses. First, in balancing power, is it center versus periphery? Uh, ano nga ba ito? The shift toward highly decentralized client server computing, coupled with an ideology of empowerment of social media platforms and its users, and the decentralization of decision making to lower organizational levels, reduce the fears of power centralization in government institutions. So, yung power natin hindi na siya since we now have that power to share our information online. It's hindi nagkakaroon na ng balance of power. It's hindi na siya centered. Yun. Nakakalat na siya. Nagkakaroon na ng periphery. So for example, a corporate internet behemoths such as Google, Apple, Yahoo, Amazon, and Microsoft, they have come to dominate the collection and analysis of personal private information of all citizens. And since these companies are private companies, they are obliged by the government to share information na pwede rin magamit ng government to stop terrorist attacks. So the power, yung 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 moral obligation is not centered on the government alone, but it can be distributed. So yun nga, nagkakaroon tayo ng balancing power. As for the other quality of life, rapidity of change, there's a reduced response time to competition. Information systems have helped to create much more efficient national and international markets. Mas lalo tayong nilapit sa isa't isa. And today's rapid moving global marketplace has reduced the normal social buffers that permitted businesses many years to adjust to competition. So, since mas nailalapit tayo sa isa't isa ng digital age, yung competition natin mas lumiliit. What is available in the international market could be available here at any moment. So, nagkakaroon tayo ng reduced response time. So, competition, it can be good, it can also be bad. Time based competition has an ugly side. The business you work for may not have enough time to respond to global competitors and may be wiped out in a year along with your job, just like what happened with Nokia. But if there's a reduced response time to competition, it gives us an edge by the time mas makahabol. And then, as for our family, work, and leisure, there's always boundaries that we need to maintain. The danger of ubiquitous computing, the telecommuting, nomad computing, mobile computing, and do anything anywhere computing environment is that it is actually coming true. The traditional boundaries to separate work from family and just plain leisure have been weakened. Pwede na tayo magtrabaho using our cell phones at the comfort of our homes. So, yung boundaries natin, mas lumiliit. Actually, nawawala na nga yung boundaries, especially for those working at home. Yun, nawawala yung boundary between your family and your work. And um, as for leisure naman and work, if we're working on our phones, we may be distracted by social media platforms. So, instead of being productive, minsan napapascroll tayo, napapapunta tayo sa leisure. So, in this digital age, we need to be firm in maintaining our boundaries. Fourth, dependence and vulnerability. Lagi nating hawak yung phones natin, no? So, mas lalo tayong nagiging dependent on technology. And today, our businesses, governments, schools, even private associations such as churches are incredibly dependent on information systems and are therefore highly vulnerable if these systems fail. Like, nung during the lockdown, yung school system natin is dependent on online teachings, online classes. What if our information system failed or nagkaroon tayo ng problem sa network? Then nawawala ng klase. We're highly dependent on information systems. And because of that, we become vulnerable. So the absence of standards and the criticality of some system applications will probably call forth demands for national standards and perhaps regulatory oversight. We also have computer crime and abuse. Here in the Philippines, napakalaganap niyan, cybercrime. New technologies, including computers, create new opportunities for committing crime by creating new, valuable items to steal, new ways to steal them, and new ways to harm others. Lalo na ngayon na yung pera natin, ah, mas madalas na sa mga digital wallets natin or e-wallets or even online banking. Bakit nangyayari 'to? Kasi mas nagiging laganap na yung online transactions natin, eh. Puwede tayong magbayad using our cellphones, hindi na natin kailangan maglabas pa ng pera. Ngayon, itong mga kriminal lalo nagkakaroon sila ng ideas on how to steal our money digitally. Yung iba hina-hack yung mga accounts natin. Or yung iba naman nang-i-scam, they steal our information and nagiging imposter natin sila. For others naman who have, for example, crypto, ninanakaw din yung laman ng wallet na yun, hina-hack. So nagkakaroon tayo ng computer crime, nagkakaroon tayo ng computer abuse. What is computer abuse? Computer abuse is the commission of acts involving a computer that may not be illegal but are considered unethical. So example niyan is spam. Yung nangyari din nung eleksyon, kung ano yung nare-receive nating ah, text. Paano nila nakuha yung information natin? How are they able to gather our information and send us unsolicited texts? Until now, nakaka-receive tayo not only texts about elections or campaigns, but about tupada and other advertisements. Six, employment, trickle down technology, and re engineering job loss. Because of technology, marami ng workers ang nadi-displaced. Re-engineering work is typically hailed in the information systems community as a major benefit of new information technology. It's much less frequently noted that redesigning business processes has caused millions of mid level factory managers and clerical workers to lose their jobs. So it can be good for the business, but definitely it's bad for the workers. Some economists have sounded new alarms about information and computer technology threatening middle class, white collar jobs in addition to blue collar factory jobs. So we need to take this into account when it comes to information systems, yung effect nito sa job loss. And then we also have equity and access, increasing racial and social class cleavages. So if this is left uncorrected, there's going to be a digital divide that could lead to a society of information haves who are computer literate and skilled versus a large group of information have nots who are computer illiterate and unskilled. Dito po mapasok yung disinformation. So, we need to ask ourselves, does everyone have an equal opportunity to participate in the digital age? Will the social, economic, and cultural gaps that exist in the country and other societies be reduced by information systems technology, or will the cleavages be increased, permitting the better off to become even more better off relative to others? Lalo na some websites or some websites that provide information, in order for you to access that you need to pay them or you need to subscribe to them. And If you don't have extra money to subscribe to them and get credible information, you'd be left with misinformation na laganap ngayon. So for those who are have-nots, they become more illiterate, or mas mali yung information na nakukuha nila. So ito yung isa sa mga challenges na nakukuha natin when it comes to uh, equity and access. So I hope with this short or quite long discussion, we'd be able to answer the questions on my first slide. No, balikan natin. Again, in this chapter, we need to be able to uh, define the ethical, social, and political issues raised by information systems, which I think we have answered in this chapter, and specific principles for conduct that can be used to guide ethical decisions, which we also discussed, and the reasons behind the challenges posed by contemporary information systems technology and the internet to the protection of individual privacy and intellectual privacy. And lastly, the effects of information systems on everyday life. So all in all, the effect is mas pinabilis yung proseso, mas dumali somehow para sa atin. But ang dami din nawalan ng trabaho. And ang dami ring na na-compromise yung kanilang privacy because of dahil sa kalakaran when it comes to our information systems. So I guess that's it for my report. Again, chapter 4, ethical and social issues in the information systems. Thank you and have a good day.